I want to teach people how to make real food with food, because what we eat in the United States really isn't food. Because if you think about it, for the majority of what we eat on a regular basis as Americans, it's coming out of a box or a package. And that means that it's somewhat altered by man or machine. And in that alteration, we get things that store well. We can put it on our shelf and keep it there for 6 months or 2 years, but we lose most of the nutrition in the processing. So I think the most kind of obvious example of that would be like a grain. So say you take brown rice, which is the whole grain, then you take the jacket off, which is the brown part. Now you have the white rice, which is inside, so it's the same plant, same food, same everything. They've removed the jacket and made white rice. In that refining process, they've removed the bran, the germ, the vitamins, the minerals, the oils, and they've left you with the starch of that plant, the endosperm, which is the sugars that feed the plant if it turns into another rice plant. So when we refine foods like that, we're super concentrating the sugars a lot of times, and we're kind of removing the nutrition part. So you can buy rice bran and you can add wheat germ to your cereals, but why not just eat the whole grain, right? So in the processing of food, we lose a lot of its nutrition, and that's just kind of a blatant example. You think about something like baby carrots, right? So those are easy, the kids love them, it's just quick, you can throw it together, but you've lost the outer hull. So what a baby carrot is they take like the ugly carrots and they shred them down, so they thin them out, they make them smaller, and then they just cut them and like shape them into round shapes. So it is still a carrot, there's nothing weird about it. I'm sure some companies put chemicals on it, that's, you know, I've heard that rumor. But generally what you're losing there is the nutritious part of the carrot is the skin and the outside. So when you shred them down into baby carrots, you're still getting some nutrition out of that. But now it's also been sitting, exposed to air, it's losing nutrition over time. It's, God knows how long it goes from the garden to, well, the factory farm to, you know, the processing plant to the storage facility to the shipping container to the grocery store to your, and then you might have it in your fridge for 2 weeks. Think about how much nutrition loss happens over time. Real food rots, right? Like that's the point of it. It's supposed to be fresh when you eat it, and you don't eat it when it's rotten. So that's why like Twinkies aren't food, right? Because they last forever. You can take a McDonald's cheeseburger and leave it in a container for 10 years and it'll still look and smell exactly the same. I think the texture is even said to be the same. So when we process foods, we lose nutrition. When we choose healthy foods that are in some way processed, we still lose a lot of its nutrition. So the goal really is to consume nutrients and get the fuel we need from our food. But when we fill our bodies with like empty stuff, we don't get the fuel we need. So we have the chronic health problems that we have. We have kids that can't stay awake during class. We have kids that can't sit still during class. We have adults that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, their kids come home and they can't take anything more because they've worked all day. So we end up with this society that kind of normalizes eating not for nutrition, that's not what our bodies are meant to do. So when we focus then on getting nutrients in with every bite, this is a tasty, pleasant thing to eat, right? It's unnecessary to think that we only can feed our kids goldfish and we can only eat processed bread sandwiches and have pasta with, you know, processed tomato sauce on it. That doesn't have to be the norm. So if you are used to having, say, a big plate of processed pasta, which is a normal dinner, you know, for anyone, a processed pasta with processed sauce with sugar in it and God knows what else. Those tomatoes have been altered in different ways, but we'll leave that kind of out of it. But you have this processed food, it tastes good, it fills you, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of nutrition, because when you have white flour, there's the refined grain. Then it's processed further into pastas. It seems like an innocuous food. How bad could that really be? But it's not how bad the food is necessarily, it's what it's lacking. So we're lacking the minerals, we're lacking the vitamins, and so that's why we have the chronic rates of disease. So if you think about the way humans evolved or how your great-grandparents ate, they ate food because that's all there was, but we're not doing that anymore. So Whole Foods decided to put together this program called Health Starts Here to really help people navigate, like, what am I supposed to be eating? But like I said at the beginning, it's different for every person, right? Like, I know what I'm eating now is different from what I was eating 10 years ago based on my nutritional needs, and it changes over time, and I expect it to change some more. But we really should be focusing on nutrition. So to make that happen, we have to increase our plant consumption, because that's really where the vitamins and the minerals and the macronutrients are. When we kind of focus on changing the way we look at things, and instead of choosing convenience all the time, we can choose to prepare ourselves ahead to make things convenient. You know, you can have that topping made ahead. You could have the baked potatoes already done the night before. You could use your crock pot for things. You can prepare your vegetables so that they're easy to grab out of the fridge. And it makes such an impact if you take that plate of pasta and then you instead shift it and you have a plate of vegetables with some pasta and red sauce. That's a whole different meal. But you didn't drastically change the flavors you're using. You just added nutrition. So we always talk about adding plants wherever possible. So, you know, when I do classes with kids, I'm always saying, okay, if you have pizza, what can you add to your pizza that's food? You know, so peppers and onions and tomatoes and pineapple and all those things. If you could have a salad with it. You know, if you're having cereal, which is a very processed food, think about if you eat like a packet of oatmeal, which is a serving size, you're not going to be full, right? You may as well have eaten the packet. You probably get more fiber out of it. So it's an overly processed food that used to be a food, but now is this adulterated thing with additives and preservatives, never mind the things they've stripped from it. We can instead just make whole oats, add some berries, nuts, and seeds. You're getting a lot of nutrition that way, and you don't have to think about it too much. It's not a complicated process. It's really a more basic and simple way of eating. It's just a matter of shifting from processed boxed products to fresh things, making it yourself. I mean, it's the easiest thing you can do if you dedicate the time to it. So when we're talking about real food, we're really talking about food that's alive, you know, the things that rot, things that don't have a barcode on them, and it's just a matter of adding more of them every day. So that bowl of cereal can have bananas and walnuts, cinnamon, coconut, whatever you want to add to it for the kids. If you start doing things in small little bits, they really become acclimated to those tastes. Think about someone who eats Gatorade and Pop-Tarts and Doritos. Their taste buds are acclimated to those flavors, those very artificial chemical flavors that burst that. They have food scientists working to make those things addictive. That's what they want to do, is sell more food. They're not in the business of making us well. So when you have someone who eats that kind of high calorie, very high flavor foods, you give them a carrot, and of course the carrot is going to taste like dirt. But when you start to increase the amount of real food in their diets, children or adults alike, it changes the way that your palate approaches things. And you can appreciate something like roasted cauliflower as being the sweet thing that it is when you're not loading your body with processed sugars and artificial chemicals. So we talked about the processing of food. So you can make wise choices when it comes to processed things, because I'm not saying you should make everything from scratch all of the time, because that's not reasonable for most people's lifestyle. When you're looking for something like a macaroni and cheese, first off, I'd say add some vegetables to it. So broccoli goes really well with cheese. Peas go really well in there. Flip it over, right? So you want to look at the nutrition facts label. So what portion of that label do you find most helpful? Right on. So the ingredient list is the recipe for the food. So you can look up here at the nutrition facts all day long. It might say 0 grams trans fat, 0 grams sugar, but it's all in there in the ingredient list. They've made the portion size so small that it doesn't count. So like ham cooking spray, which is 100% fat, it's oil, that's what it is. It says 0 grams fat on the bottle because the spray is 1/3 of a second. You cannot spray it for 1/3 of a second, and no one uses that amount. So then you're kind of fooling yourself into thinking those percentages and numbers make the difference. It's really the ingredient list. So the first ingredients are what there is the most of in that food. So if the first ingredients are refined things like sugars and flours, it really shouldn't be something that's an everyday food. So those cereals and the processed breads that we eat, which for a lot of people are a staple of our diets, that's the foods that don't have nutrition. So you can crowd out those foods by increasing the amount of real food that you eat, and it kind of makes it a more general approach rather than saying I have to count calories or I need to portion size everything. You just focus on increasing the amount of real food. So choosing a package like that, you have 3 options. The first extreme, I guess, is the Annie's. That's the grass-fed, probably the most expensive. It's got no hormones, no antibiotics added. The cows weren't fed corn and made to be sick animals. It has real ingredients in it. There should be nothing artificial in that one. And the food coloring they use is food. So it's a spice, turmeric or paprika or whatever they're using. It's not an artificial dye. So then you have the 365 mac and cheese. That's the Whole Foods brand. That's 365, it's our generic brand. And they focus on no artificial ingredients, but it's not a grass-fed cow, so it's still, you know, somewhat unnatural. Then you have the longer list of ingredients on that one. I'm not sure exactly what's in it without looking. But then you have the third example here, the other store brand that has the last few ingredients are food coloring. So when you have those food colorings in there, your body has no idea what to do with that. And it would be fine if it was in one thing that you ate, twice a year, but it's in everything that we eat. So anything that's colored, look at what it is that they used for the food coloring. You might see the word annatto. I think it's just a spice that's like a yellow spice. You might see, like on that 365 one, do you want to just see if they have a color at the bottom of the list there? So beta carotene for color derived from corn. So they're just using annattos in there too. They're just using natural food ingredients to create your food rather than putting chemicals and processed junk in there that your body can't process and doesn't know what to do with. So when you're choosing a product like peanut butter or mac and cheese, just choose the one with less ingredients. Make sure you know what the ingredients are. You might pay a little bit more, but it's the same thing with shoes, right? If you buy the cheap shoes, you're gonna buy them more frequently. If you buy the more expensive shoes, hopefully they last longer. So you give the kids the cheap shoes because they grow out of them so fast, and you buy yourself the expensive ones because they're worth it. And it's really a matter of your health. You only get one body. And I'm a big person that, they tell you when you're on an airplane to put your own oxygen mask on first. You can't care for your families if you're not well. So you have to take care of yourself, and it's not a selfish thing. You're creating a future for your children by fortifying your own health. So choosing a peanut butter, you can choose a peanut butter that has peanuts in it, maybe peanuts and salt, or you can choose a peanut butter that's loaded with hydrogenated trans fats and sugars and all kinds of junk that you don't need. It's not necessary to make the product good. It might be a different texture for you if you switch to like the Teddy brand of peanut butter. But you can add a little honey or add a little maple syrup to it to sweeten it if it's not sweet enough. And I guarantee as you kind of shift your taste buds, that will be more appealing. The hydrogenated oils, like I know myself, I grew up eating tons of like Crisco and stuff like that. And I recently ate a Hershey's Kiss, and that's what it felt like in my mouth was Crisco, because I'm just not used to that more processed thing. So your taste buds acclimate, and most people it's about a week, especially if you went all in and just ate real food for a week. Spring and summer is the best time to eat fresh, real foods. Blackstone has a great farmer's market. There's one in Woonsocket at Thunder Mist. So there's lots of opportunity to get fresh food and know where your food comes from. Then it becomes how do you put that into practice in your home. So like as an example, my husband's big on pizza. So if I don't have stuff prepared in the house, he's just gonna get pizza. But I've shown him over time that it's simple to make something quicker than the pizza can get to the house, right? So a lot of times now he's kind of making a better choice. So if I buy like kale and Swiss chard, a bunch of leafy greens, because those are the most nutrient dense foods, I have to kind of force them into our diet a little bit. But if I buy them and I just leave them in the fridge whole, they don't get eaten. Neither of us cut them up. But if the day I get home, I take the stems off and cut them into small bits and maybe put them in a Ziploc bag with a napkin, then they're in the fridge. So when I want to make something fast, I can just take a handful out and put them in chicken broth and just steam them. So there's a lot of ways to kind of make it happen in your life, but you have to make it happen in your life. So it has to be steps like making a salad bar fridge, taking carrots and cucumbers and broccoli and cauliflower, whatever the kids like to snack on, and having in portioned containers. Like you've had real good success with that, right? And you take the time to put into it, but it's an investment in your future and your family's future. So to me, it's totally worth the effort that we put into eating well. And it's the quality of food that makes the difference. So you can choose organic when possible, and you can choose the ingredient list that's shorter and more real. Or you can just take the easy way out and just kind of take whatever is available. Get the kids involved is huge. So if they are invested in what you're preparing or shopping for or eating, they're gonna be much more likely to try something. So you have to get in the kitchen, you have to burn the rice, you have to get the kids to make a huge mess and help you. And it's hard to resist taking over with children in the kitchen, but the greater or the earlier you give them that skill, the greater it's going to build over time. So I meet people in their 20s that have never made a meal. My father-in-law called us once and asked how to make a tuna fish sandwich. A lot of people just don't cook. So it takes, practice. The first time you get on a bicycle, you're not good at it, right? You're gonna cut things wrong. You're gonna cut your finger. You're gonna, burn things. But you have to experiment to learn how to use that innate skill that we all have in trusting our instincts and listening to our bodies and really feeling what what it is that we need. If you think about, as humans evolved, we went from season to season with nature, with the earth. So in the wintertime, we're eating stored foods, which typically have a little bit more concentration. Dried fruits have concentrated sugars, dried meats have concentrated proteins. And when we eat heavy and rich foods, the ones that store well, grains or root vegetables, those are calorie-dense foods. And we need that to kind of fortify our bodies for the New England weather. But if we go into like midsummer and we're eating that way, we're gonna kind of be deficient in what we do need and kind of be having an excess. So we're likely to be kind of tired and like weighed down and holding extra weight. So in the spring we need to eat bitter and astringent things like lemon and berries and asparagus and the leafy greens that come up first to cleanse us from that richer winter diet. So if we're eating properly by season, winter could be rich, spring is very kind of cleansing, and then summer becomes very high carbohydrate. So you have the cucumber and the tomato and the pineapple and all the really sugar-rich foods that contain a lot of water to replenish our bodies from what we lose in the summertime. So you go from this mineral, calorie-rich winter diet to a cleansing spring diet to a carbohydrate-rich summer diet, and then in the fall you go back into the stored foods and the harvest of everything that's around. So after about a year of following a seasonal diet like that, most people find that they don't get the hay fever in the spring and they're less prone to colds and flus, and they crave the fresh food when it's time appropriately. And it only takes that year for our bodies to get back into the cyclical rhythm of the earth. So when we get out of our own way and we stop putting in the food colorings and the preservatives and the processed stuff, and we start to put in the nutrient-dense options, we find that all of the little minor aches and pains and complaints that we have really start to dissipate. So a lot of people notice most chronic disease comes from inflammation. So some people like myself, my inflammation shows up as eczema. Other people might get arthritic joints. Some other people might get migraines. And inflammation really is the root to all of them. So if we're putting things in our body that don't belong there, and we're not putting in the things that do belong there, that's where we end up, is in an inflammatory state. And it happens in a million ways in a million different people, but we can control that by focusing on the nutrient-rich foods. You know, in the seasonality of things, spring and summer tend to be more vitamin-rich. Things that grow above the ground tend to have more vitamins. Things that grow below the ground tend to have more minerals, so they're more grounding foods. So when you eat lots of leafy greens in the middle of the winter because you're on like a January cleanse and you're eating juices and salads, you're cold, you're cranky, you're hungry, you probably are getting more colds and flus, you have less energy. But when you're doing the same thing in the summertime, it could be cool, right? So you could eat raw food and coleslaw and cabbage and all kinds of things that are raw and you'd be fine. So it's just a matter of kind of figuring out what your body can tolerate and increasing the amount of plants that you add all the time. So in thinking about food from a nutritional standpoint, it's hard to just give someone a bag of potato chips as a snack, because what you want instead of the potato chips, which are just kind of empty calories, you want something that's nourishing. So if you want salty, crunchy, maybe a whole grain popcorn is a better option. Not a microwave popcorn, but like a real popped popcorn. Or maybe you know, a rice cracker with, or a rice cake with, you know, some peanut butter on it. That's that salty, crunchy kind of combo. So you can find little tweaks and little ways to kind of increase nutrition, but still keep the flavors that you're interested in having. The real food can be found almost anywhere you go. It's just about educating yourself, finding what you're willing to kind of sacrifice, what you are willing to give up in your life and find a replacement for, and really learning to prepare things in your home to make it simple for yourself, to really follow a plant-based diet. Now, I like to think that like 80% plants and 20% other works for me. And that other could be, you know, wine and cheese and chocolate and meat, or it could be, you know, like bread and cake and pasta, whatever is my thing. So if you try to focus on what the majority of what you consume being real food, that other stuff doesn't really make a big impact on your health. If it's reversed, if you sometimes eat a salad and 80% of the time you're eating out of a package, that's where the trouble is, right? So we have to kind of shift that ratio of food that's fresh my father had humored me when I first started doing this work and did a 21-day challenge with me, and he's a very not healthy eater. And he did the 21 days and he jumped all in, did it all right, lost like I think 10 pounds or something in 20 days. But he said to me afterwards, he's like, everything was pretty good, you know, I enjoyed that, I feel great, but the food just goes bad in my refrigerator. I'm like, you're supposed to eat the food. Like, people, I think, have this misconception that healthy food tastes bad. It can certainly taste bad. And people have this misconception also that like salads are healthy or tomatoes are healthy, but it's a relative term, right? So if you're inflamed, tomatoes are not healthy for you. If you're, you know, prone to heartburn, maybe tomatoes aren't good for you. Or if you're allergic to peanuts, peanuts aren't a healthy food, right? So you have to figure out for you what is appropriate and try out different things. I'm a firm believer that we only have control over so many things. So if we don't take control over things we have control over and we just kind of let it all happen, it's usually not the best idea. You can't control how polluted our air is or how polluted our water system is or, you know, what's coming into the school cafeterias, but you can control what you choose to purchase and consume. So the more of us that make these higher quality choices, the less expensive it becomes. Like I think about even 6 years ago, gluten-free products were like ridiculous and hard to find. Now you can find them at any store, you know, if you know what to look for. So we vote with our fork 3 times a day. So it's important to tell the companies, I want this mac and cheese that's $1 more because it doesn't have the dye in it. Or because that's going to keep the kids out of the doctor's office. So you pay now or you pay later. So I always say you pay one guy in a white coat or another guy in a white coat kind of thing, you know. So we can make these choices for ourselves and our families that make a big impact. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know. We can have the nuts and the seeds added to our breakfast cereal and still have the breakfast cereal. We can still enjoy pizza on Fridays, just put some peppers on it, you know? So there's a lot of ways to increase nutrition, and it really is about education.